Today for our 105th Hippopotamus defensive video, we're going to be going over a very nice game from my guy, Nick Luciano, a strong supporter on my Patreon page. And yeah, just a strong player overall, a good friend of mine. Here, he starts this game off by playing b3. We have a hippo as white here. You can play it as both sides. And against d5, we have the move of bishop to b2, e3. And against the move g6, here Nick goes with the move g3. I don't recommend that, because here black could have played bishop g4, which according to the engine isn't even the best move. What they played with bishop g7 is better. Although if you're a hippo player, you probably don't want to play something like bishop e2 here. You probably don't want to play knight f3 or f3. And if you play knight e2, which is where you'd like to go, well then bishop f3. And this bishop has infiltrated our position, attacking the rook. We can move the rook, but now for the rest of this game, we cannot castle kingside. And this bishop is honestly just really annoying. So going back to the move g6, if you start out with queenside development, really focus on the queenside before you even touch your kingside bishop. And if you're playing the hippo and you develop very quickly on the kingside, develop that really well before you touch your queenside bishop. For example, in this position here, let's get this knight to d2 before we play g3. You can play d3 here, knight d2, g3. And look, if the bishop wants to attack you, you just play knight e2. That's covered. That's covered. There's no chance of bishop f3 now. So by the time we play g3, that was already covered on f3. And until then, obviously the g-pawn covered that spot as well. So in this case, bishop f3, we just snatch it right off. So I think that playing d3 and knight d2 here gets rid of some potential issues that you could have against bishop g4 ideas. But okay, in the game here we have g3. Black instead goes with bishop g7. We have bishop g2. Now we're fine. I mean, if the bishop wants to attack us, we play knight e2. The bishop can't infiltrate at all. Castling kingside is played instead. We have knight e2, bishop g4 now, and h3. Nick asking, hey, what do you want to do with the bishop? Do you want to take my knight? If you take my knight, I'm just going to calmly capture back with my queen. And I have the bishop here, and they're both fianchettoed. That's great for white. Black goes, okay, fine. I'm going to go back to f5. We now see g3. And then the finishing out of the hippo setup. Knight c5 here is played. Pretty strange setup from black in a lot of ways. The pawn structure doesn't look too abnormal, but I would say that this bishop on f5 is awkwardly placed. And on top of that, this knight on c5 is a little bit odd in my mind. I don't know exactly what the target is. This knight and bishop could be targeting d3. For example, if we make some kind of random move, you do got to be careful about this tactic. I almost fell for this once in a tournament. Thankfully, I caught myself at the last second, but black here could go with bishop takes d3. And the whole idea there is that, okay, we're down a pawn. If we take the bishop, knight takes with check, and yeah, we are going to lose our bishop there. And it's not so simple just thinking, oh, okay, we're going to trap the knight, because then this knight moves, and in this case, the bishop does defend it. So you want to be careful for that idea. So I guess you could call the pawn on d3 a target, but it's not all that hard to stop. There's a lot of ways to do it. In this position here, you could castle. That's one way. You could play queen to b1. You could play bishop to e4. There's a lot of moves here. b4 is played. That's another option as well. Now, I personally would be a little hesitant of playing this, just because by playing b4, it weakens c4 and more importantly, a4. And that's exactly where the knight jumps in. But Nick still has an advantage here. It's about plus 0.3 for white. And yeah, we see the move bishop d4, good centralizing move. This knight on a4. On one hand, it's very active. On another hand, black does have to be careful about that knight. And we see the move of b5 here. My guess is black here is trying to strengthen the positioning of that knight. And I understand that, but at the same time, by playing b5 and d5, you've really weakened the c5 square. So you got to be mindful too. Sure, maybe you do find a hole. Maybe you do find a square that we can't kick your knight out of with a pawn, but you also got to try to make sure that you're not creating weaknesses yourself. I just think practically b5 is not a great idea. We see the move g4 from Nick, kicking that bishop back. Castling kingside, solid chess here, rook e8, f4. Love that move, expanding. If black's going to give us the space, we'll take it. And this happens a lot in the hippo. You get your hippo setup, you get your structure. Sometimes your opponent takes full control of the center. Sometimes they give you space. Maybe they're expanding on one side of the board only. Maybe they're also not sure what's going on, so they kind of sit back a little bit. But your pieces in the hippo are very well placed to launch a kingside or queenside attack if you know what you're doing. So here the move f4. We got two pawns side by side. Nick here wiping out half of the 5th rank. A great bishop on d4. And knights that can spring in very quickly. Queen c7 is played. And in this position here, knight g3 is what Nick went with. Very playable move. Not going to say that's a mistake or anything. I would say that c4 here is the engine move, and I like it because of the fact that you are going after two different targets here. Now, this move of c4, it might not seem like the best move because there's so much pressure on that spot, but sometimes that's what you need. Sometimes your opponent is putting so much pressure on one square that you want to really put a pawn there and break that side of the board open. And black really can't do much. I mean, if the d pawn wants to take, we capture back. You just helped our bishop get better. That's about all you did. And if you ever take with the b pawn, thank you for the knight. Thank you for the knight. We're winning. So I think c4 here is a move that really just puts black under a lot of pressure that they can't do much with. But instead we have the move here of knight to g3. Also really love this move, tucking the knight behind the g-pawn. g5 is an idea now that we can think about. And, I mean, again, bishop d7 here. Let's say black plays a move like this. Can this knight move anywhere? Not really, right? So in that case, g5 could be played. Now, Nick didn't have his opponent play bishop d7 there, so it's not like Nick missed this move or anything. But I've had this before. In fact, the tournament that I hit National Master, I got this same kind of trap, except my opponent's pawn wasn't even on g6, so I just straight up won the knight. But this knight's done. The knight's done here. Now, in this case, you could play knight h5, but we're still going to take. We can take on g7, snatch off the pawn. We're up a pawn, and we're attacking your king. Black's in trouble. So going back, black here, fortunately for them, didn't play bishop d7. Instead, they played bishop b7. This knight still has an escape square. So we see this move of bishop to e5, queen b6, queen e2, developing, knight d7. We see capturing off. Okay, you do want to capture there. Nick there with good chess, because if you drop back to d4, well then black's just going to take your bishop, and they also have their queen on that spot. They're also going to do that. You could play d4, but then you just get trapped. That's not much good. So the best thing that white has here, and it's not close, is capturing on g7. King takes is played. We have king h1 getting out of the pin. The engine might not love that move compared to some other options, but it's still very playable. And if you look at the engine eval difference, it's only about 0.4, which is nothing crazy. And on top of that, practically, again, I do like that move because e4 now is something that you can play. And you also don't got to be worried about queen takes e3 check in the future. Just queen takes e3. Two very different things. In the game, we have e5, and this next move I love from Nick, f5. f5, shouldering that pawn. I don't even think that's the official term, but that's the best way I can say it. This pawn on f5 is past the e5 pawn now. This e5 pawn can do nothing about that pawn. And black really needs to be careful on what they do. If they take the pawn, our knight jumps into one of the best squares, if not the best square for attacking chess for a knight to land on the king side of the board. A lot of openings really focus in on this f5 spot, and the Hippo's one of them. In this case, we're going after that king. Great activity, completely crushing position. If you look at our piece activity and black's, it's not even close. And if black goes, okay, I'm going to lock it up instead, well, now we can play f6. f6 with check. Now, yes, throwing in the knight also works, but f6 check followed by queen to f2 or f3. Either one is great because you're attacking the knight with a battery ram. If something like rook e6, you play knight h5. If something like c5, you can take the knight, or even take the pawn first, then take the knight, then throw in a check here. You got a fork. This is just a great position. So black can fall apart very quickly here. We see the move of knight to f6. And yeah, here queen f2, really gearing up on that file here. And yeah, I mean, c5. Sure, black does have attacking chess. They do have space on the queen side, but who cares? Who cares? I mean, I don't know. That's how I think about it. Some players like to attack on the side of the board that there's no king on. And personally, I've said this many times on the channel. If we're in a race, okay, and our kings are on the same side, and you're racing to attack air, and I'm attacking your king, I would much rather attack your king than attack space or air or whatever you want to call it. Attacking the king is the way we want to go. And if you look at what pieces are defending this king, you got 1, 2, 3. That's about it. How many attackers do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This knight might not be crazy right now, but it is ready to spring in, and we got 3 advanced pawns. I just don't think this king has enough defense right now. We see the move of f takes g6, breaking things open, g5 attacking that knight. Great move. Knight h5 is played, and from here, Nick just plays great chess, finds the best move of knight takes h5, finds the best move, or one of the best moves of playing rook to f6. I think technically the fastest mate is playing queen takes h5 with check. But at this point, rook f6, you're just picking how you want to win the game. This king can't even move. And when we're talking about defensive pieces now, what does black even have? I don't know. We see the move of rook f8, now capturing on h5, queen h6 with check, snatching off a queen, why not? This is resignable for black, and black resigns very quickly. So nice game there by Nick. I think he did a great job of really slowly building up that kingside attack. A lot of openings that many say are aggressive win in the first 10 moves. The Hippo's not like that. It's not, right? The Hippo's not an opening where you're going to win in 10 moves. Now, I did play nothing but the Hippo to reach the National Master title. I have over 6-hour course, which I'll leave a link below on if you're interested in checking that out. But and in that course, I really talk about the Hippo in depth. But yeah, I mean, following the making of that course, the creation of it, I did hit 2200 by playing nothing but the Hippo. And I think the great thing about the Hippo, especially at the higher levels, is the fact that it's hard to prep for, especially because hardly anyone plays it. There's a lot of ways that you can get out of the Hippo or deviate from the Hippo if you want to, depending on what your opponent does. And again, it's not one of those openings where you're going for little 5, 10, 15 move traps. Those kind of openings, I think a lot of players see those and go, oh, that's aggressive. That's Mikhail Tal. That's really, aggressive attacking chess, I guess. But at the same time, if your opponent just studies some theory, they're never going to fall for those tricks and traps ever. Something like the Hippo, though, something like the Vienna game, something like the Grand Prix, something like any of those openings that are a slow build-up into attacking chess, I think can actually get better results, more sound results, to say. Just my opinion. That's been my experience. When I play openings that are more of a slow burn approach, where you're not trying to win the game right away, but you're just trying to get a solid game of chess where you have ideas, you have built your skills in certain areas. That, for me, tends to do better than hoping my opponent doesn't know about a trick or trap. But of course, tricks and I was about to say trick or trap. It sounds like trick or treat or something. But of course, those things, they can work up to a certain point. But at some point, you're going to have to learn how to change your style of play. And Magnus Carlsen's one of those players. Now, of course, him and I would say do have different styles of play. I would also say that we are at different levels of play. We all know that. So I'm not comparing myself to him in that way. What I'm trying to say is that he did change his style. If any of you guys followed him as a young player, he was very aggressive, attacking, sacrificing. But he realized at a certain point, in order to play sound chess, in order to make it to the top, he had to go into a more positional type of style. And when he was attacking, it was more of a dynamic, positional type of chess than just going all out, checkmate or nothing. Yeah, that's just my thought on it. Thanks again, Nick, for your support on the Patreon. Thank you again for sending in this game. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know and let Nick know what you thought of it. Peace. I wanted to finish this video out by saying thank you to Walter, Rob, Steve, Rob, and Ray for helping make this January video possible, as well as the rest of my Patreon supporters. If you're interested in becoming a member, there are some exclusive benefits that you can gain by doing so, and I look forward to seeing you over there on the platform. Peace.